All right, welcome to the Sci-Fi Express Lane. Award-winning sci-fi creator Jeff Carroll here. I won an award for being a science fiction pioneer at the Miami Science Fiction Film Festival. I don't take that lightly. So that's really pushing out there and making things happen constantly. So hopefully I will have an award-winning science fiction film, but that's next year. We'll see. I just finished it, so I'm happy. But today I wanted to talk about, I think it's probably because I'm looking at science fiction film festivals and that I want to apply to. I'm putting my marketing plan together for my film that I just finished, Why I Love Sci-Fi. It's a documentary. And I'm looking into it. And I was talking to a film festival producer, and we're talking about, I says, of course, it's a black science fiction film. So I was talking about black science fiction fans, right? And where are they, right? And I said, you can't really just look at the black science fiction fans totally in isolation, right? Because in context, it's a bigger conversation that needs to be had. I've been in the science fiction, I'm going to say, in the community probably since 2008, okay? And there's a Miami Science Fiction Society. There were 3 science fiction groups in Florida. Necronomicon, which is the only one still going. Oasis, Orlando Science Fiction Society, and then there was the Miami Science Fiction Society. Now, Miami was always the smallest, and they're still around, but they're about 10 to 20 people, okay? It's more like a book club, right? But they do they have put on events prior to the quarantine, so they're a bona fide group. Then you had the Orlando group, and they used to do a full-out convention every year in March. And before COVID, they stopped. And so it wasn't COVID. The other one, the Necronomicon, they met in Tampa. They still meet in Tampa area, sometimes a little outside Tampa. And, they had record numbers in probably 2016, 2017, but they got spooked by them. I'm going to say that. They changed up and kind of didn't want to go the route of the fan festival. I think it was maybe 10 years ago when Twilight came out. Twilight killed the market, and they went and did their own festivals, right? Where it was just autographing, and there was no vendors, nothing else but Twilight. And they did enough to complete a tour, but it didn't do like Comic-Con numbers. It still did better than some small cons, but it didn't, do like regular Comic-Con numbers. And when you combine those, when regular cons had big name guests, celebrities, it was amazing, but that's what Comic-Con in San Diego does, and that's what New York Comic-Con does. But regular Comic-Cons, they really didn't just bring in the celebrities, because many times celebrities cost a lot of money, and they didn't. The situation to bring them in wasn't always there. So the TampaCon did that, and they do after parties and stuff like that, and they got spooked because it was too many kids, and they were science fiction enthusiasts, hardcore science fiction enthusiasts, right? And I think they had gotten some of the love from Star Wars and Star Trek, and a lot of these young people were getting into science fiction brands that had science fiction fans for 30 years, and these guys was in their 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And it was just real cumbersome, and none of them were really black. All right, so I would go to all three of them, and I would be, one of three or the only black person in there, right? And in the last few years, it's been an average age of 60. And as you know, 60-year-olds in their 60s for 10 years. After that, in their 70s, in their 80s. And I think what happened is, the salt and pepper turned to gray, and then the gray turned to white. And I mean, man, if it's not a bunch of wheelchairs, walkers, canes, at these conventions, man, I don't know what to tell you, because we don't have 20 or 30-year-olds in it. And I started, I got into the festival, the science fiction conventions, around 30. And so that's the mainstream dilemma, that they're facing a dilemma of attendance or just generational overlap. A lot of these festivals, a lot of these fans, they are into science fiction, but they're not science fiction convention people, because in the conventions, I also think that there's another thing that hit the conventions. And I'm just talking in general. I'm not talking about black people, right? Let me get to black people next. But I want to put the framework together before I explain what I think is going on with black people. So the other thing that impacts the conventions is what drew people to science fiction conventions was the level of question that the science fiction books were answering. They were provocative, they were confusing, and people needed the explanation. So you wanted to come to the convention to meet the writer, the person who knows, the scientist who could explain it, all of that. And those were powerful. You would go, you'd be like, that's why. I remember when I met Ben Bova, who is probably Florida's top science fiction writer. And he writes a populated solar system universe. So he's got colonies on Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Venus, even explorations to Mercury, right? And that's his joint. And but he worked at NASA. So he was a really interesting guy to listen to, and you could only hear him at a convention. And there's guys like him all around the country, all around the world, that have so much natural wealth in their experiences that you want to go to a convention and just be able to ask them a question to hear their explanation. Oh, well, then comes technology, then comes cell phone, then comes video conferences, then comes, did you tape the panel? I couldn't be there. The virtual panel. And that had an impact on science fiction conventions and all conventions in general. The reason why people would still go to conventions was for the networking and the fellowship and the intermingling. I want to meet a girl. Can't do that at a virtual panel. You can't see who's sitting next to you because ain't nobody sitting next to you, and it's not social media so much like that, and people get spooked by it. So that, I think, the technological aspect of it, the fact that you could hear these scientists explain their stuff on the internet, you didn't have to go to the convention. I remember when COVID hit, I tried to watch every panel from Comic-Con. They made them free, right? And you could go on there and look at the panels from Comic-Con. Oh my God, by November I'm still watching Comic-Con panels. And then I would see the same person at another convention's virtual panel. And they say the same thing. So after a while, I'm pretty sure by December or February, I had already gotten virtual panel fatigue. And I think that had an impact on the science fiction festival community, convention and festival. So that's the two things I think. One, they're dealing with a generational age out, and many of them didn't want to commit to doing and hosting things that the younger people would want to be in. And number two, technology, for a number of reasons. I'm just going to group all of them together. That's the overall dilemma of science fiction. Now, the black science fiction community kind of has all of that, but kind of the age out thing, none of them is like 100% affected us. They just are other issues, because it's not like we went to the conventions so much to don't want younger people to go. That's not a big deal. Like I said, if you find 5 black people there, and I'm talking about, I've been to conventions, science fiction conventions, all the way up from Boston, New York, Atlanta, just about the East Coast. I don't think I went to anything science fiction wise west, but I've been through Florida in about 5 states, and all of them look the same, gray and white haired, canes, walkers, and so forth. So that is the dilemma of the mainstream. Black people, we're sort of new to it, right? So my logo, I Love Sci-Fi, came from a Martin Luther King parade where, the people were saying, I don't really read sci-fi. One of them was a member of the black fraternity, Omega Sci-Fi. And I said, how you don't read sci-fi when your shirt says sci-fi? It's a joke, but it became my logo, and I'm running with it, and it's provocative, right? So when it came to black people, many of them are new to science fiction. They're not even only new to science fiction reading and the genre, they're new to science fiction speculation as a whole, because I think until Obama, right, Black Panther, and then Luke Cage, and we still haven't had a black space story yet, but we had Finn and we had Mace Windu sort of take us there. Black people had too many terrestrial issues to worry about extraterrestrial speculation. We were dealing with civil rights, we were dealing with this, and our biggest brains, we're dealing with this. We didn't have an Elon Musk. We have a lot of hidden figures, but they're not our only big brains, and our social scientists like myself that speculate about things, we were speculating about, do we need a black state? How do we live? Do we integrate? Should we move up north? Should we move down south? Where should we go to school? Should we go to schools with public schools and fix those up? Should we go to schools, get charters and start our own charters? We had a lot of issues that we was dealing with. We're still reconstructing our dismantled African culture. We don't know how to relate to each other, male-female relations. We're putting that back together. We're putting back together our health. These are things that we had. And I think those things impact us speculating about space and time and other things. And then I think lastly, and I just kind of wrap it up with this, we still also think that comics and other things are for kids. I don't watch Star Wars. I don't watch that Star Trek stuff. It's still like a diss, It's not everybody, but when you're dealing with like older people, which would be the ones that would appreciate science fiction, You still run into those things, you know. I didn't read fiction until my 30s. I can count the nonfiction books that I read. It was all in my early 20s on my hand. You know, I read Zorro, my favorite black sci-fi book. I read Waiting to Exhale. I read No Disrespect. I read Coldest Winter Ever, right? And I think I made, you know, Autobiography of Malcolm X in high school, and then some Toni Morrison, I think Sula or Tar Baby, you know, and those were for school projects. That's crazy. That's crazy. In my 30s, I read a book a month. I read a Star Wars expanded universe for a whole year, you know, but that's in my 30s. And I just, again, I wasn't into reading fiction. I felt like a waste of time. So I think all of those issues that we're dealing with, you know, I've talked about, you know, how black comic community still feels that comics are for kids. We haven't gotten to the Blade Runner level. We haven't gotten to Walking Dead. We haven't gotten to some of the older storylines, you know, like Department of Truth. There's black people, I don't think they even understand that Philadelphia is for them. They think it's for kids, and it's not. It's not porn. It's not porn, but it's just adult themes. So we still have to have that conversation. So anyway, I think all of those factors affect black people going to science fiction film festivals and science fiction conventions altogether. Horror is a different story. Maybe I'll deal with that later on this week or something. All right, Sci-Fi Express laying out. Share, subscribe, and comment.